a surprise that the residents of the Lafayette community in Kwara State has risen to the occasion. It shouldn't be a surprise that any moment from now, there will be an uprising because people has given up over the continued ineffectiveness of the government, both local and state, and the federal government to guarantee their safety and security. They have lamented their frustrations over incessant attacks on the locals being adopted and majority of them being killed. They are now demanding for an explanation. Why should we have a government? Why should we have constituted authorities? And yet, they fail to address the nagging issue bordering on the constant, incessant bloodshed within the communities that have disrupted the daily activities, the communal and economic activities within this locality. This is not just unique. Of course, this affects the entire regions of this country, where people could no longer go to their respective engagements by the day without fear of being kidnapped or adopted. So for the youth of the Lafayette community, they have expressed the anger, the bitterness, the resentment that have been built up over the years. Now, when you now study their actions, that is to tell you that you don't take the Nigerian youth for granted. Not until it gets to the point they will push back. The Yoruba youth, predominantly in those communities, have marched to the palace of the Emir of Lafayette and vandalized the premises because of what they consider as conspiracy of silence on the part of the Emirate councils. That there have been several serial attacks, kidnapping, killings. The Emir have not been able to address these issues. That if we are to be other ethnic nationalities, the Emir would have swift, of course, to respond to that. When being that this is affecting the Yoruba clan, the Yoruba people, and the Emir felt less concerned or indifference about the plight of the people, of course, reminding them of the pain they are still nursing. You know what transpired between the Fulanis and their Fanjas, which eventually led to the capture of Ilorin, which is owned by the Yorubas. Some persons might ask, well, they have demonstrated courage and whatever be the case. It's an expression of anger over what has been happening without any political or deliberate attempt on the part of the security operative, the constituted security operatives, to nib it at the bud. It is quite unfortunate. Here is what I want us to know. He said, they have been crying and dying in silence. A resident said in a video clip, people are being kidnapped every week. We don't sleep with both eyes closed anymore. And nobody, neither the governor, the chairman, nor even the emir, is doing anything about it. The protests, you can imagine, the protest, so said, was triggered by accumulated anger over persistent attack and lack of effective response from local and state authorities. This is where it's going. When the people are forced to the wall and left with nothing, not even the government that cares, there's no effective response to address this. And some persons will say this military are tied, their hands are tied, everybody's hands are tied. Why? They unleash mayhem consistently and deliberately every day Every week of the day, people are being kidnapped, people are being killed. If you fail to pay ransom, they will massacre you, and that will possibly become the next turn of the survivors of yesterday, might become victims of today. So that is what is happening. That reveals to you that Nigeria is in the state of emergency. It's a declaration of emergency, whether you like it or not. If people's life could no longer be guaranteed by the institution of the state, then what else do you call it? You are simply reminding them of what transpired in 1804, in 1800 to 1804, where the Fulani invaded the Lorraine, and eventually it was conquered. And that wouldn't have been possible without the help of the Afonja, who was driven by greed and excessive quest to grab power. Eventually gave Fulanis, accommodated them, invited them to assist him win the war against his own king's men. Eventually, when they won the war, definitely over time, they settled down, they consolidated, they built, they gave birth to offsprings, they invited more of their counterparts from different parts to join them. Eventually, they have to overrun the same Afanja that invited them, who they fought to defend. Today, they have to kill him and take over his dynasty or his throne. That is just the case. And this has been one of the pains of an average Yoruba today, that they lost Ilorin, and several attempts to reclaim it, engaging in war of confrontation, indeed, was abortive, was never a success. And with this, they are now being more careful at dealing with the Fulanis, the people you invited. You opened your door, being that possibly you want to share some affinity with them. Of course, when you get to Ilorin today, majority of the population of Ilorin are Fulanis. They are intermarrying, and you could hardly separate the Yoruba, who are the Yorubas, and the Fulanis. Majority of them now has Fulani origin, Fulani ancestral links. So that has made it pretty difficult for you to separate them, because it will be a tug of war. Possibly family will be pitching against the same families on the basis that we don't share common heritage or affinity, lineage, and possibly due to religion. They may have common religion, which is Islam in predominant, but then something somewhere will instigate endless crisis. It just building up and eventually might explode. So what does that tell us today? That the very fact that the people have expressed such a level of frustration and have called on the Emir, the Emirate Council, the local government chairman, the state, and they failed to come to their aid. They could not continue to watch while their loved ones are being kidnapped, killed on several occasions. It is becoming a ritual. It's just a matter of who becomes the next victim. Possibly it could be anyone, anytime. So they are no longer sleeping with their eyes closed, which is very fundamental. And the government has to look into this. Now, what will be the approach of the government regarding this? Of course, the NDLEA, the National Drug Law and Enforcement Agency complex, was also raised down by these angry, irate youths. They set fire on the National Drug Law and Enforcement Agency office in Lafiagi and neutralized the pilots of the Emir of Lafiagi, smashing windows and damaging parts of the building. They said, we have been crying and dying in silence. They have been crying and dying in silence for God knows how long, how many years, yet nobody cared to come to the rescue. And they decided to end it once and for all. That if the palace of the Emir is in that community and yet could not address these incessant killings alleged to be from the Fulani extractions. So why should the Emir or the palace be there in the first instance? Why should the existence of the people be threatened? That give you opportunity to cohabit with them, you eventually usurping the chances of their survival and conditioning them to the point that they no longer felt secured in their own communities. I mean, this is their ancestral home. They have no other place to call their ancestral homes. Majority of them fleeing from the communities, and the continued attack on the people, ripping them off of their scarce resources by way of imposing sanctions, ransom on them. And that has become more lucrative, and eventually, upon discovering, they understood that these are not part of the society. These are invaders coming to trouble and invade, possibly with the intent of overrunning the entire community, so they have to rise. But one thing again is that it is not just about raising down the palace of the Emir and the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency and the rest of them. Are you prepared to dance the dance of many reading? Are you prepared to dance the dance of many reading? Because it is just the beginning, not an end in itself. So strongly, and as far as I'm concerned, based on realities and antecedents of the past, the Fulanis will definitely stage a comeback, and that might possibly be brutal. Such community might be deserted in a matter of days, honestly, because they will not take that lightly, and that might degenerate to something that possibly could not be curtailed in a matter of days, except drastic actions, urgent actions is taken. But then why should the government wait until disaster looms? Why they have the opportunity to have stemmed tides? Unfortunately, they kept mute for whatever reasons, or perhaps it is not even in their interest. They are not even perturbed or concerned because it doesn't affect the immediate families. So if you don't let the devil takes you, and God for us all, everyone to himself. If you don't let the devil take you, nobody cares. Just imagine where hundreds and thousands of people die within the shortest possible time, and yet the government could not meet this crisis at the board. The security operatives could not go after these people. They knew where they reside, they knew their modus operandi, their sponsors, and the rest of them. Why are they not going after them? Good to some greater extent, the military, the security operatives have been greatly compromised. Just as we are seeing today, it's quite unfortunate. Even in the police force, you see how many ammunitions entrusted in the hands of the police force, missing. Who may have stolen those things? Do you mean that it would be very easy to move ammunitions in the possession of the security operatives, and yet they could not know how that was passed on? It is quite interesting, honestly, this development. Some persons might say, you see, the Yorubas are not coward. The Yorubas have risen to the occasion. Well, as I've said, if you're prepared to dance the dance of many rhythms, then you must guide your kids and prepare for the worst. Definitely, these people will hit back. The time and when it's immaterial, but definitely the Fulanis never forget. And if they have incurred any loss, possibly they may demand for that. Whatever be the case, one thing is important. Why is the government not interested or have not demonstrated courage, political will in addressing these incessant attacks on communities, adoption of the children? Just about 2024, or partly 2023, 2024, over 2.2 million people were adopted, and ransom collected, paid to these kidnappers runs in trillions. So this is more or less a robust program for those embarking or sponsoring them. You see, it's the easiest way of becoming billionaire overnight. But the people said, we want to put an end to this. We have been dying and crying in silence, and nobody came to our rescue. Now we must address this abnormality. We are ready to fight. Come what may, of course, everybody must sit up. Nobody could go to sleep again with two eyes closed. This is interesting. And yet, the government could not give excuse, could not give reason why he could not protect the life and properties of these people. Don't be surprised, these mobs, angry mobs, might definitely be tracked even by the same security operatives that have failed to address this. If they have nipped that at the bud, if they have addressed these incessant killings, adoptions, kidnapping, bloodshed, definitely the people wouldn't have even contemplated in staging a protest as a way of expressing their grievance. You see the same government, the same security operative who has been watching people killed, bloodshed everywhere, they will now be tracking, they will now have the technique to track these people just by expressing their vote of no confidence in the administration of Emir and the state governor, and of course the local government and the traditional or religious rulers that have certain influence on the people or their subjects. It is quite very unfortunate. He said, worsening insecurity in their communities, including repeated cases of terrorism, kidnapping, and killings. You can imagine terrorism, kidnapping, and killings. The same government that have failed woefully in protecting these communities and every other community is now accusing or charging Mazi Nnamdi Kanu of terrorism. Why the main terrorists are having a fit day, invading communities, taking over communities, killing at will. I mean, as if nobody cares, nobody is in charge, nobody could call them, could put a stop to that. You can imagine such level of destruction. Honestly, the protesters, predominantly youth from the area, voiced frustration over what they term government inaction in the face of continued violence. They were seen, of course, in a video clip chanting solidarity songs and waving placards, demanding urgent intervention to curb the bloodshed and adoption disrupting daily lives. Disrupting daily life, they could no longer be free in their own country, in their own communities. They are being surrounded and surrounded by killers, terrorists who have been paid or contracted to do the dirty game, to ensure gradually and consistently that they annihilate this ethnic nationality, the Yoruba race, in those regions and possibly occupy. But the Yorubas have said for the first time, and possibly after learning from the experience of Afonja, might be having a rethink. We cannot watch. We can't just fled to the gallery just as Afonja did and eventually have not recovered from that. It's an irreparable loss, and that they will not possibly want to repeat in their time. Whatever be the case, it's an expression of anger and frustration on the inactiveness on the part of the government to address these myriads of problems. How long will they continue to watch their own families, relatives being killed, adopted, molested? I mean, all manner of cruelty being meted on them. Some are suffered to the point of death. It is quite unfortunate, and hopefully we do hope that normalcy will return to those communities. And the price of freedom is internal vigilance, and I hope the people understood that, and definitely they have called on ant, having fetched firewood with ant hill. You know what that means? Definitely, and hopefully they will be equal to the task to face the dance of many rhythm, and whatever happens, the people have the right to say no when the versions becomes high. You don't continue to accept such barbaric tendencies are killing the indigenous people, the communities, and eventually leaving them at the mercy of whatever happens to them. No, they must rise and defend themselves, and if that becomes necessary, be it that the government has not just failed, repeatedly failed the people. So what should you expect the people? Should you also allow them to have a repeat of the experience of conquest? Because that is what they are gearing towards. Yes, gearing towards, and eventually, possibly, the people have said, we can't accept this. We are well acquainted with history. We know what played out about a century ago or so. We cannot allow history to repeat itself. And if that happens, definitely everyone will be at the risk of extinction. And hopefully the Yoruba will maintain their stand, possibly. And I hope that the right thing possibly could be done if the government address these incessant killings and the rest of them. Let everybody return to its regions, or possibly divide this country so that people can manage their security, manage their resources, and define, of course, their common interests based on shared ideologies and cultural similarities and heritage. It has become real, though some Yorubas have expressed in the past strong ties and affinity with the Fulanis. They say they are brothers. We love them, and the rest of them, the likes of Fulani Kayode, I think, or the rest of them, you know, is a very controversial personality, not being straightforward. He might be saying a different thing and meaning a different thing in it entirely. So you shouldn't take his words for granted, and you shouldn't take his words serious, and as the case is, because you cannot say that the people has no right to defend themselves. Sadly, it may have degenerated to destruction of properties. As of the time of report, there was no casualty recorded. I think it is quite interesting. But then, let's watch and see how, in the matter of days, possibly what could play out. But it's important to sue for peace. Definitely let people get to express themselves and live a normal human life, a human life without fear of threats, of feeling such sense of insecurity, even in their own communities. It is quite unfortunate. That is the height of irresponsibility on the part of any government that fails to protect life and property. So what do you want the people to do? You want them to watch you while they are being slaughtered and annihilated? No, what do you want them to do? You mean you want the communities to fold their hands while they are being butchered, massacred, adopted and kidnapped, on daily basis, and they have been crying out in pain, in agony. The same government failed to address this. The same government that was after Mazi Nandukanda, that never raised the pin against any person or any ethnic nationality, yet they hold him back for more than 5 years because of speaking the truth, providing solutions on how the worsened state, economic and security-wise, of the country could be fixed, but they ignored him for obvious reasons. Their agenda is to overrun Nigeria, and that is just the case. So people cannot continue to watch why disaster looms where evil, of course, posing a threat to their life, continues. That is just the case across Zamfara and the rest of them. You see where people are running, young people calling for safety. They don't know where to run to. That is it. When they run to the forest, of course, the forest bed has been rounded up by the Fulani, the terrorists and the rest of them. So where should they run to? It has gotten to the point that the people possibly will march to respective local government secretariats, state secretariat and the rest of them, and demand for justice. Not until that is done, these politicians will not take you serious. Not until they understand that it is no longer business as usual. They could go to hell with whatever money. Of course, it's the common resources that belongs to the masses, and eventually, if they're seeking re-election bid under the current configurations, then you might be in for a very big shock.